So today's workshop is Kitchen Garden Cooking School Harvest Series on mushrooms. We're going to talk all about mushrooms today. My name is Becca and I am a program manager here at Tarrant Area Food Bank. With us today is Elena O'Daniel. Elena, can you give us a wave and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Elena, and I work for Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, where I'm a family and community health agent. So I get to bop around Tarrant County and teach nutrition and just have a blast with people.
Wonderful. Elena is going to do the nutrition portion of our lesson today. But before we get there, we've got a few other things to talk about. So for today's workshop, you should have some handouts that were available to you on the Eventbrite event page. If you were not able to access those, we will send those out afterwards. So no worries, you will receive them and be able to use the recipes that we're going to try today. If you haven't found the chat box yet, which I'm guessing you have, go ahead and chat in your name and where you're from. We love to know who's watching. And any questions or comments you have throughout the class today, go ahead and put those in the chat box and those will be relayed to me. So today's workshop, we're going to cover a few different things, all about mushrooms. We are going to talk about how to grow mushrooms, all the good reasons we should eat mushrooms, and then I have 3 wonderful dishes that I'm going to demonstrate for you today, and hopefully you'll be able to make at home a little bit later. This class is a way to kind of experience gardening, things we can grow here in North Texas, how to bring those into the kitchen, how to increase the number of fruits and vegetables that we get to enjoy every day. So a wonderful way to combine several things that we enjoy doing. So today we're talking all about, in this class, we talk about items that are in season. And while spring and fall are great times to do some foraging and mushroom growing, it's likely that you will probably be growing from a mushroom kit if you decide to grow mushrooms and grow them indoors, in which case it's always mushroom season. So we will touch a little bit on what it means to be in season. You may have heard that term before and why it's beneficial to you. So in-season produce is something that is being harvested right now. It's either coming out of the garden in the area you live or coming from a farm nearby, which means it's likely traveling a shorter distance to get to you, so using less fossil fuels and gas. It's also fresher when it gets to you if it doesn't have to travel as far, which means and it's going to taste a lot better as well. And also it may be a little less expensive. If there are lots of items to go around, it's going to be less expensive. So again, mushrooms typically always in season if we're growing them inside. But if you are foraging, which I have 0 experience doing, the more wet times of year here in North Texas, spring and fall are going to be better times to do some foraging. So if you do any foraging, pop that into the chat box and let us know what kind of foraging mushrooms you do. I would love to hear about that. Okay, so growing mushrooms, I already mentioned. You will likely grow them in a kit. That's the way I've grown them before, but again, it's one of the items that I'm new to growing. So I've gardened for a long time and recently, in the last couple of years, tried to grow with a couple mushroom growing kits. So these things are, you can buy kits online. They come in lots of different sizes and styles. You might do a little research and see what kind is best for you. Sometimes they come in a box, sometimes they come in a log. Sometimes you can buy the spores and inoculate your growing substrate yourself. Whatever kind of adventure with mushrooms you feel like getting into, there's lots of possibilities. There's a couple local mushroom growers that I know about, Midnight Mushroom Company and Texas Fungus. They both sell growing kits, so you might check those out if you're in the North Texas area. They sell growing kits and they also sell their own mushrooms that they grow. So that would be really cool to get to buy some super fresh mushrooms if you're not quite ready to grow your own. Mushrooms prefer cooler temperatures, about 60 to 74 degrees. So a typical indoor temperature is going to be appropriate for. They like to stay moist, so area where your AC or your heat is going to blow directly on. The kits that you can purchase usually grow very quickly. It's once you start them up, get the process going, it's like 8 to 14 days, but it can take longer depending on what you purchase. So make sure to read the instructions carefully and put it in the proper location. If you have other questions, you do have a growing guide in your hand. Please feel free to check that out. I will say one troubleshooting item that I had in my own personal experience was I tried to grow a kit that came in a little cardboard box in the summer, and my AC was on a lot. So it dried out too much for the mushrooms to produce. So they got to a decent size and then they all dried out. So I was really disappointed with that. But that was a learning experience for me. So typically I will try to grow those when it's not super hot outside and super dry in my home. Okay, so that's what I have on growing mushrooms. If you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat box. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Elena and let her discuss all the great reasons we should be eating mushrooms.
Besides being delicious, mushrooms are a fantastic source of fiber, a fantastic source of carbohydrates, and they're also an abundant source of just a whole bunch of nutrients that we're not going to find in a lot of different places. But before we delve into that too much further, first we want to cover, you can kind of see it, our My Plate. So of course, My Plate has 5 different food groups. We have our dairy, grains, protein, fruit, and then my personal favorite category is vegetables. And of course, our mushrooms are going to sit squarely in our vegetable category. And when we're looking at our My Plate and looking at our plates, right, because My Plate is a great visual representation of how we should kind of divide up our plates for each meal. And we want to make sure that we're getting a lot of different colors of fruits and vegetables on our plates. So mushrooms are kind of brown, so we want to pair that maybe with some orange fruits or vegetables, some green fruits or vegetables, because when we're looking at all of those different colors, we're getting a lot of different nutrients in there as well. So I like to say eat the rainbow. So making sure you're getting a wide variety of colors, that way you're getting a wide variety of nutrients that are really going to help promote your overall health. So a serving size for mushrooms is 1 cup of raw mushrooms or a half cup of cooked mushrooms. And that one serving is going to run you about 16 calories, which if you're eating raw mushrooms is a steal. And like I said, that serving of mushrooms has about 1 gram of fiber, 2 grams of carbs, and less than half a gram of fat. So like I said, mushrooms are a great source of a lot of different polysaccharides that we're not going to find anywhere else, because mushrooms are really unlike anything else, right? They're a fungus. They're not a fruit of a tree or a seedling or anything like that. They're a fungus, which is pretty cool. And those polysaccharides are going to be beneficial to heart health, liver health, and when you combine those 2 bodily systems, you're going to be benefiting your health all over your body. Mushrooms are also a fantastic source of copper, which is going to help promote a lot of enzymatic reactions in your body. And they're also a fantastic source of B vitamins, which help promote cell-to-cell communications. And much like in human life, if you're not communicating well with somebody else, things break down. So if your cells aren't communicating well, there's going to be a breakdown in health somewhere in the body. 1 serving of mushrooms also provides us with 16% of our daily recommended intake of selenium, which is going to help promote immune health in a fantastic, fantastic way. It's an essential mineral, which means our bodies can't make selenium on its own, so we have to get it in our diet in order to make sure that it's in our bodies. We also get a lot of folate from mushrooms, as well as mushrooms are a great source of plant-based vitamin D. Which helps our bodies absorb calcium into our bones. It also helps our bodies from developing certain diseases, promotes immune health, really fantastic nutrient that we need a lot of. So mushrooms have a lot of great nutritional qualities that can be enjoyed in many ways. I'm super pumped for Becca's recipes today. They look delicious, and I'm really sad we don't have smell vision today, or like virtual tasting. So thanks, guys.
All right, thank you so much, Elena. And I love that you mentioned that although we put mushrooms in the vegetable category when we're talking about My Plate, they really are a fungus. And so they're a different type of food than we get to experience on most days. And so they do provide some great and different amounts of nutrients than we would be able to get from some of the other foods that we normally eat. I also wanted to touch on, Elena said that they're a great source of vitamin D, which is true. And if you put your mushrooms like on the windowsill before you're ready to cook them, they will absorb more vitamin D and that amount will increase. So if you expose your mushrooms to UV light before consuming them, you will drastically increase the amount of vitamin D. So fun fact, they're pretty cool. Okay, so before we get to our delicious recipes for the day, I'll kind of walk you through a few of the varieties of mushrooms that you may commonly find in the grocery store. There are so many different kinds that you can grow or purchase from those local sources that I mentioned, but I will discuss the types that we can find in the grocery store. So what I have here are several different varieties, and we will use all of these today. You can kind of mix and match a little bit depending on the recipe that you're using. So just kind of use whatever your store has available. It's okay if they don't have exactly what your recipe calls for. You can kind of mix and match a little bit. So I know they're hard to find. Sometimes they're hard to find good quality ones that last on the shelf for a while. So the most common type of mushroom that you are likely familiar with are white button mushrooms. So these are like the majority of the type of mushrooms that are consumed. I know this is not my favorite type of mushroom, and I was really excited to find out that there were other types because I didn't really like this one. So it's great to try several different kinds. So if this is the only one you've had, give the others a shot. This mushroom is great cooked and raw. You could use it on pizza, in salads, in soups, in cooked dishes as well. But this is the white button mushroom. You will likely find this, if nothing else, at the grocery store. Very closely related to the white mushroom is the cremini, which also goes by baby bella or several other names. This is a young portobello mushroom. And it can be used exactly like our white button mushrooms. So it can be eaten raw or cooked, soup, salads, pizza, lots of different options. So very similar to the white button mushroom, you will likely find these very easily as well in the grocery store. Then we're gonna move on to our portobello mushroom, which is also very common, spelled several different ways depending on who you're asking. So the portobello mushroom are the large cap mushrooms. These are a great meat substitute. Some people will cook them just as patties because they are so large and dense and have a nice strong flavor, very earthy flavor. So if you're not sold on mushrooms yet, you might not want to start with this one. And then if you are using this one, you can choose to leave the gills in, or you can scoop them out with like a grapefruit spoon or a melon baller. They're fine to eat. They will just maybe discolor your dish a little bit. So whatever your preference, if you're stuffing them, you will want to scoop those out so you have room for your stuffing. So we've got 3 main ones so far. The next one is shiitake, which is very popular by name. You may have heard of this one before. So this one is great for stir fries. It has a light woodsy aroma and flavor. It's best when cooked. Probably you may be able to eat them raw, but it's better cooked. And you will want to remove the stem on this one. It has a very woody stem. So just eat the cap on this one. And then the last one that I'll show you is my favorite mushroom, and this is the one that I have the most experience growing, is the oyster mushroom. So the oyster mushroom has a very delicate odor and flavor. So if you're new to mushrooms, you may try this one, or if you think you don't like them, give this one a try. Great in soups and stir fry. I also like this one a lot because it is so mild and it has a great texture too. It doesn't get quite as slimy as some of the others. To me, it has like a firm tofu texture. So if you're okay with that, you will likely be okay with oyster mushrooms. So we will use all of these today. Some of them I've already prepared, but I will show you how to prepare several of them. Okay, get that out of the way. And then we're gonna jump into our recipes. So if you want to look at your recipe handouts and follow along, fantastic. If not, you will have access to them later and you'll be able to try these at home. So the overhead vent hood may turn on, so I'll try to speak up over that, but if you have trouble hearing me, please let me know. We are gonna start with the pulled shiitake mushroom barbecue. So if you are like me and like to eat vegetarian, but really miss barbecue, this is a great recipe for you. So again, I've prepared most of our ingredients already, but I will show you how to prepare the mushrooms for each dish. So I've got my ingredients ready. I'm gonna go ahead and heat up my pan to get my oil heating and put my onions in once that's hot. So for this recipe, it does call for quite a few mushrooms because it cooks down quite a bit and it's meant to be a meat substitute. So as you can see, I have a very overflowing bowl of mushrooms here. It calls for baby Bella, and please feel free to mix and match as you want. Again, the Portobello is gonna have a nice meaty flavor. So if you want to include that, it will contribute nicely to the dish. So today I'm gonna show you how to cut up the shiitake mushrooms for this dish after we get our pan heated here. We have a question? Okay, we've got a question. Is it safe to touch dry mushrooms? It should be. Any of the mushrooms that you can eat. Like I said, there's a lot of different kinds. Most of the ones sold in the store are gonna be very safe to eat. So if you get them dried or dehydrated, it should be the same as fresh. Please be very careful and do your research before ingesting anything that you forage. So all of these common types, I would say go ahead and touch dry. And then Elena, we have a question that you might be able to speak to. What is the difference with the nutrient content dry versus fresh? Do you know if there's a big difference there?
I don't think there's too much of a vitamin difference. Like even between the different varieties of mushrooms, I wasn't able to find significant difference between like cremini and portobello and shiitake. There wasn't a super big difference. So I don't think there'd be a super big difference unless you're looking at maybe some of the more water-based vitamins like B vitamins. They might be a little bit lesser in the dry mushrooms, but again, if you're eating a varied diet, that's not something to really worry about.
Okay,
good question.
Great. Yeah, great question. Yeah, so with dehydrating, it's likely going to be the water content that is going to be impacted. It is the water content that's impacted the most. And then like Elena said, some of those water-based vitamins may be impacted a little bit, but likely with mushrooms, it's just going to be more of a concentrated flavor, and some of those other nutrients are going to be a little more concentrated because you'll likely use a larger quantity. Wonderful question. So we've got our oil in the pan. We're going to go ahead and get our onions going, and I'm going to throw in the mushrooms that I've already chopped up while I'm demonstrating the rest of the mushrooms just to get this dish moving. This dish does take a little bit of time, but I'm going to start it first, and that way it should be finished up by the time we're done with our class today. Okay. Got our onion in there. Always put your vegetables into a pan with hot oil so that the oil does not absorb as much into the vegetables. And I'll add our mushrooms that I already chopped up. I used some baby Bella, some oyster, some portobello, and shiitake in this one. I had plenty to choose from today, and so I just chose a nice variety. I liked using the portobello because it really gave me a lot of quantity, a lot of volume of mushrooms to add to this dish because it does call for so many mushrooms. But again, it's the main part of your dish. It's not just adding a little flavor. This is the bulk of the dish. Okay, so we'll let this get started while I demonstrate how to chop up the other mushrooms. And again, this is, I'm gonna demonstrate shiitake mushrooms to you. So these are the ones that we want to take the stem off. If you have someone helping you in the kitchen, you could have them kind of twist and rip the stem off. Some of them are going to be tricky though. So if it doesn't work very well, you'll probably want to use a paring knife or a small knife to get that stem off. Just kind of put the mushroom on its side and do a little sawing action. Just do it nice and carefully. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just really woody. So that's why it's really hard to cut, because of the texture. So, but if you can rip it off, you might get some easy ones that are a little bit easier to remove. You could have somebody help in the kitchen. It's a good task. Okay, so to get the pulled pork texture that we want for this recipe, You don't have to chop them perfectly. Doesn't have to all be the same size. As we know with pulled pork here in Texas, it's going to be, you'll get some shredded pieces, some larger chunks, so that will be perfect. So if you're practicing your knife skills, it's a great dish to do this on. All right, give that a little stir while we're cutting these up. I like to cut them with the top of the cap up, and I'm going to take my chef's knife and just do a nice rocking action and some nice slices here. Keep your fingers out of the way. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect because we want that shredded look. And the Shiitake mushrooms and Portobello mushrooms are perfect for giving that pulled pork look. If you like pulled pork and you're trying to eat less meat, this is going to be a great dish for you. You can serve it on a bun or a roll or in a lettuce wrap, whatever your preference. Okay, so we've got, I'll show you a few pieces here. A few just nice slices there. We'll add that to our skillet and we'll give it a nice stir. So we're going to want this to cook down until most of the moisture has been removed from the mushrooms and the onions are becoming translucent. So again, this does take a little while to get these cooked down to the right texture, but that's all right. We want it done right. If you don't have as many mushrooms or you're not able to find as many as the recipe calls for, feel free to cut it in half a little bit. You may find that with the amount of barbecue sauce, you'd like to bulk the dish up a little bit so it's not quite as saucy. Maybe you want a drier texture, that's fine. So the onions are starting to get a little translucent here, so what we're gonna do next is add a little bit of salt and pepper, and then we're gonna turn the heat up and let it cook for about 5 minutes. If there's any questions, now would be a great time to ask any of those. As we're kind of waiting for this dish to sear up a little bit. What are some of your favorite mushroom dishes? What do you like to put your mushrooms in? We've mentioned a few things so far. They're great for meat substitutes, and we've got 2 of those to demonstrate to you today. But what are your preferences? What kind of dishes do you like to make with mushrooms? Oh, and has anyone tried mushrooms? Like, what are some that I haven't mentioned that you like to eat? I'll let you chime in for a minute while I get this going. All right, again, so we've got some salt and pepper that I'm gonna add here, and we're gonna turn the heat up a little bit so we can caramelize these onions. Oh, yes, I can talk about where to buy the mushroom kits. So the 2 local sources that I know of, there's a place called Midnight Mushroom Company. I know they're on Facebook. They likely have their own website as well. And then the other one is Texas Fungus. I believe they're based in Arlington. So those are local to North Texas. If you, the kit that I've tried before is from a company called Back to the Roots. Back to the Roots. They sell several different kinds of garden kits that are great for a windowsill. That's the one that I've tried and enjoyed so far. Times and gifted it to a couple people as well. Back to the Roots. They have several different varieties of mushrooms, but there's a couple that they offer. So that's a great place to order some kits. Typically, I've seen them between like $15 and $20. You can get ones. We also tried a log with some inoculated spores in them. We tried doing that one outside at our community garden. It didn't work very well. It's hard to keep things moist here in Texas, and maybe we just need a little more practice at it, but that might be the right kit for you. It did not work very well for us, like I said. But again, it is Texas and it's pretty dry a lot of the time. So that can be tricky with mushrooms and maintaining moisture. All right. So this is looking really nice. There's not very much moisture in here. We're gonna let this caramelize a little bit. While we're waiting for that, I'm gonna get my ingredients for the next recipe. The next recipe we're gonna work on is the creamy lemon garlic mushroom pasta. Long name, great dish. The next step for the cold shiitake barbecue is to barbecue sauce. You can use whatever barbecue sauce you would like. Choose your favorite from the store, or perhaps you make your own. It's great that you can choose whichever one you like. That way, if you like something a little spicier, a little smokier, maybe you're watching your sugar intake. Barbecue sauce has a lot of sugar in it, so if you want to choose one that's low sugar, that is a great choice to make. And it looks like we are almost ready for that step. So you can saute this a little bit longer if you would like at home. We'll keep moving things along here for our purposes today. But you could allow the onions to caramelize a little bit, maybe get some seared edges on your mushrooms to kind of give that meat texture that we're going for. All right, so the sauce that I chose today is just an original basic barbecue sauce, and it calls for 2 cups. So you might put in a little bit at first to see how much you like. Like I said, if you don't want that as saucy of a barbecue, then go ahead and add less. You could always add more. This jar contains about 2 cups, so we're going to add most of this. So that's quite a bit of barbecue sauce, but it's going to be well worth it for this dish, and I think everyone is going to enjoy it. Okay, one last stir here before we add our sauce, and then it'll need to simmer for 15 minutes. So we'll do that while we work on the rest of our dishes. Pour most of this in. We'll see how it goes along the way. Turn it back down a little bit so it can just simmer. That looks like just about enough sauce for me. So I'm going to leave it right there and let that simmer. All right, again, turn it back down so you don't get any burnt pieces. And we'll work on our other recipes. Okay, so next we have our, like I said, our creamy lemon garlic mushroom pasta. So again, we're going to heat our pan before we add anything to it. So we're going with medium-high this time, and we're going to add some oil. The mushrooms we're going to use for this recipe are baby bellas. Again, you could use a variety of different mushrooms for this one. I just had plenty of the baby bellas, and so I went with that. You're going to need about 2 cups of mushrooms, and of course you can increase that or decrease that depending on your preference. Okay, so for this recipe, if you like bigger slices, you can certainly do bigger slices, but I chose to do a nice chop. They don't have to be exactly the same size, but if you're going to chop, go ahead and chop them into smaller pieces, or if you're going to leave, they're all similarly sized, but they don't have to be uniform. That will help the cooking process work properly. So again, we're going to use our chef's knife, just kind of cut in half, put in a few slices, and then chop it into chunks. So take our mushroom, cut it in half. That way you have a nice flat side to work with, so it's not rolling around. Keep your fingers out of the way. Turn it, keep it together. If it doesn't stay together, then just move yourself around the cutting board. That one didn't stay together very well, so just kind of gather. Again, we'll cut it in half. Gonna go ahead and add our oil so we get that time to heat up. We're going to add the pan and cook them until they're a little bit golden. You're going to kind of stir fry them a little bit, saute them. You only want a little bit of oil in there so it doesn't absorb too much. Tips for cleaning mushrooms. Excellent question, and I should have mentioned it already. When you are getting ready to use your mushrooms, like most other produce, we want to wash it off before we use it. However, with mushrooms, they will get very slimy if you just run water over them. So the best way to clean them is to take a damp paper towel or cloth, probably a tea towel or something, not a terry cloth, and just wipe the dirt right off. The ones I had today were very clean, so I had very little dirt to wipe off, but that's the best way to do it, is just take a damp paper towel or cloth and wipe away. Great question, apologies for not covering that. When you're shopping for mushrooms at the grocery store, you want to choose mushrooms that are nice and firm, that don't look slimy. Sometimes in the packages they come in, they can get slimy fairly quickly, and we want to avoid that. So get the freshest ones you can find. Like I mentioned before, there's several to choose from. The more mature the mushrooms get, the stronger the flavor. So keep that in mind when you're choosing your mushrooms. If you want a more mild flavor, choose a younger mushroom, smaller typically. Okay, so we're gonna let this saute here just a little bit. Make sure you've got all the chunks broken up. I had a few pieces in there that weren't cut all the way through. But we're gonna let this saute. And then the next step is going to be to add some garlic. We're gonna then add our cream. We've got lemon zest and salt and pepper. We'll finally add some parsley and Parmesan cheese, and then we'll mix in our pasta. You can use whatever pasta you want for this dish. I like the spiral noodles, but you can use fettuccine noodles or spaghetti, whatever you like. Okay, so those are cooking very nicely. Make sure our barbecue here is still doing well. Looking very good. Okay, so we're gonna let these get to be a little bit golden brown. Looking good, looking good. And we'll go ahead and add our garlic. And let those flavors open up here for just about a minute. Smelling very good in here. I'm right over the barbecue sauce the whole time, so getting lots of good smells here. I'm excited to taste test these later. For the cream for this dish, it does call for cream. You could use half and half or milk if you like. You're just gonna get, it's not gonna be quite as thick. So if you're watching your fat intake or just have a different preference, please feel free to substitute those in. It doesn't have to be cream. It's just the way the recipe was written, and so that's the way we're working with it. Okay, so you can smell, I can smell that garlic. It's getting to open up here, get some nice smells going, and we're gonna go ahead and add our cream. 1 cup of cream. And give it a nice stir. And again, you've got these handouts as well, so this should be the second recipe that you're looking at. It's got some nice nutrition facts on the back and some shopping tips. On the back of the recipe handouts as well are some other flavors that go well with mushrooms. I know sometimes I've got random ingredients in the kitchen, or I have a new food that I'm wanting to try and I'm not sure what to put it with. Those flavors and other ingredients are great suggestions for if you're trying something new, maybe experimenting a little bit in the kitchen and want to make some of your own dishes. Kind of helps us figure out what things go together well, because we want to enjoy what we're eating, and so we don't want to, you know, mix and match flavors that don't like each other. All right, so this does need to simmer for just a few more minutes here. Again, if there's any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. Elena's our nutrition expert, so if you've got more nutrition questions, I'm sure she would love to have those. Okay, make sure our barbecue isn't sticking too much. I need to turn our heat down just a little bit if it does. Okay, our sauce is looking good. Look at that, bubbling up. Our next step is going to be to add the lemon zest and juice. You're going to get a stronger flavor of lemon the more zest that you add. So if that's not one of your favorite flavors, you can start out with a little bit less. But the lemon really does make this dish nice and bright. So I wouldn't omit it if you don't have to. I would leave it in. Lemon is not one of my favorite flavors, but I do really enjoy it in this dish. I'm learning to like it more. All right, so we'll go ahead and add our lemon juice and zest from half a lemon. It's about a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of lemon juice and the zest from half a lemon. Give this a nice stir. Let that incorporate, let the flavors get mixed throughout. Barbecue's cooking hot over here. Next step is going to be to add salt and pepper. And that's to your taste. So if you prefer less salt or more salt, I usually start with, when it says to taste, a 1/4 teaspoon and then work up from there. So you will learn your own preferences, but start with a 1/4 teaspoon and then work your way up. Likely a 1/2 teaspoon is plenty if it says to taste. If they want much more than that in a recipe, they'll let you know. They'll list it specifically. Okay, the next step is going to be our Parmesan cheese and our parsley. We're going to put our Parmesan cheese in first and let it start melting a little bit so we can get a nice consistency. I've got shredded Parmesan cheese today, but the grated will work just as fine. So again, we're going to let that melt here for just a minute before we add in our parsley. Parsley tends to lump up a little bit if we do them both at the same time. So got a nice little cheesy sauce going here. Not too cheesy, not too overwhelming, but just enough to give us a good flavor. Parsley in there. I used flat leaf parsley today. If you want to use curly leaf, that's fine. If you don't have any fresh, please feel free to use your dried spices. That will work out just as well. Now is a really good time to be growing parsley in the garden. So if you're a gardener and looking for new things to grow, parsley grows really well in the cool weather, along with cilantro and dill. So if you're looking for some good things to grow right now and get some herbs for your kitchen, those are great choices. All right, so our next step is going to be to, you can see my parsley is trying to become lumpy here. It did okay this time. The next step is going to be to mix in our pasta. So I made our pasta already just so y'all wouldn't have to watch me boil anything. But we're gonna go ahead and add this in, and I've saved some of the cooking water. So let me show you. After I cooked the pasta, I saved the water from that, And we're gonna use that to thin this out a little bit if it happens to need it. You likely won't need very much, but it, again, may depend on the cream or half and half that you used, or how much cheese you've added. So we'll kind of mix this together a little bit at a time. I am going to need a little bit of my pasta water. Start with a couple tablespoons at a time. You don't want to add too much in and have it become soupy. Parsley is going to start sticking together. Turn my heat on just a little bit longer while I get this pasta mixed together. We had a question come in if you could add basil or other herbs to this dish. Fantastic question, and that sounds amazing. I think basil would go very nicely. You could perhaps go with more of an Italian flavor profile and add some oregano in there as well. I think that's a great question. Definitely personalize this dish with whatever herbs and spices you like. You could even make it a little bit spicy with some red pepper flakes. Really up to you. I think that most of the Italian herbs would go very well. Okay, so our dish is just about done here. I'm gonna let it heat back up. Make sure that cheese is nice and melted. Incorporate all that. So you can see that it's not a very heavy or thick dish. Lots of pasta, so if you wanted to add in more herbs, you could even add some cooked greens into that. That would be very good. Add some more mushrooms. So whatever your preference is, if you're like me and Elena and love your veggies, go ahead and add some more veggies and make this a really good dish full of veggies, lots of different colors. Okay, so last dish, y'all, and this last one is so quick, you're not gonna believe that it's real. So I'm gonna get some of this out of the way. Bear with me for just a moment. Our next dish is mushroom and walnut taco meat. So what I've got for you here is, and I'll move my food processor over in a second. We've boiled our walnuts, and we have white button mushrooms, calls for 7. So don't want to go overboard there, but we've got 7 mushrooms. We've got a little bit of oil, and we've got a variety of spices here. So all we're going to do is add this directly into our food processor or blender, whichever you have is totally fine. Again, I'm going to get a few more things out of my way here, so y'all can see what I'm doing. Got our food processor. We're first going to put in our mushrooms, oil, and spices, and we're going to pulse it. Should add everything that I said I was going to add. All right. Again, you can use a blender if you like. Whatever you have will be fine. Okay. What I did with our taco meat is I pulsed it in the food processor and got it to that nice texture that looks like ground beef. And then we're just going to heat it up in the skillet until it's nice and warm. And then it'll be ready to serve. So this will take a little while, but I'm going to show you what we can, the rest of our finished recipes here. So we're going to have a wonderful meal, and I know that everyone is going to enjoy this. I'm going to serve our barbecue on a bun. Give us that authentic flavor and look. But again, you could serve this on its own with some cornbread, on a lettuce wrap, whatever you like. So we've got that one there. We've got our nice pulled shiitake pork, not pork, barbecue. And then we're gonna get our mushroom pasta dish. Make sure we get a little bit of everything in there. Our mushroom pasta. And then we're gonna make some tacos. All right, so serve your tacos with whatever you would like. It's gonna look a lot like ground beef. It smells great. It's got those great classic taco seasoning spices: cumin, paprika, chili powder, onion powder, garlic powder. So we'll add a little bit of lettuce there. You could add some cheese, some sour cream, whatever your favorite salsa is. We'll put a little pico on here as well. And this is going to be a great dish for us. So I hope you'll give these a try at home. You have all the recipes and the instructions on some growing tips for your mushroom kits. If there's any other questions, please feel free to pop those into the chat now. I hope you'll join us for a future workshop. You can visit us on Eventbrite for our other workshops. You can go to YouTube for some previous recordings. Visit us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram for lots of great information about Tarrant Area Food Bank. And check out our website at tafb.org to find food resources and to volunteer. All right, thanks so much everyone for joining us today and bearing with us through a few technological issues. I hope we'll see you again, and please stay safe and be well. Thank you so much.